Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about LinkedIn Sales Navigator, namely how you can get the most out of it. The best leads, in my opinion, when you're going in outbound sales are the ones that you can self-source. And if you can source them in a way that helps you personalize the messaging to them efficiently, then you're going to be in a much better position. Good news is most folks don't know how to make the most of Sales Navigator. So by knowing the hacks and lessons that I'm going to teach you in this module, you're going to be able to find leads that no one else can. That's your colleagues, your competitors. And because no one else can find them, they get reached out to you less often, and therefore they're going to be more likely to be receptive to your message. Let's go. The first thing we're going to touch on is how you can actually use Sales Navigator to search for leads. So when you jump into the platform, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at the top bar where it says search. Right there it says lead filters. Click on that and it's going to open up the lead searching interface. On the left-hand side, you're going to see all of the search criteria that LinkedIn gives you. These are preset filters that you can include or exclude from your search to affect the search results. I'll run through each of them and the key use cases that you can use them for. On the right, as you add filters, you're going to start to see prospects populate there. When we initially start adding filters, we're going to see that number is huge. It's going to be in the millions of people. We don't want a list of millions of people because we're going to have to manually go through this list and add them to a lead list that we'll create, which we can then begin targeting. So ideally, we want less prospects to scroll through and have a more targeted search results, because then we're going to save time and be able to find just good fit prospects rather than wasting our time scrolling through people who aren't a fit for our product or service. So let's go through the filters that they provide to you. At the start, we begin with company filters. What company they currently work at. This is helpful if you want to exclude certain companies or if you're trying to target a certain account. Next is the company headcount. How many employees does this company have? This can be helpful because your product might not be a fit for really small companies, or you might find that really large companies already have something or need something more custom in place for what your product does. So you want to make sure that you include the headcounts that are most applicable for your solution. The next filter is past company. So this one's really useful because what you can do is include companies that you already work with in the past company field. What this is going to mean is that the results are people who actually used to work at companies that are your current customers. Therefore, they might already know of your product or have even used it, and therefore are going to be much more receptive to your messaging, given that they might not have something like your product in place at their new company. You can use really relevant messaging like, hey, spotted used to work at Oracle. Oracle, one of our most successful customers, they use our solution to solve this problem. Have you got anything like that in place at new company? Another thing you can use this past company for is start adding in your competitors and find people who work at your company now that used to work at your competitors, so you can get some competitive intel from people who actually have the most information, your current colleagues who used to work at your competitors. Next up is company type. So this one includes things like public company, privately held company, non-profit. I find this one's best to try and exclude some companies that I know aren't a good fit. For example, I very rarely sell to non-profit or government companies. Therefore, I can exclude them from my search and just reduce a little bit more noise. And then finally, in the company section, company headquarters location. Where is the company where the lead works based? This is helpful because most sellers have a defined territory. So although your prospect might be based in Ohio, their company is headquartered in New York. Especially with the rise of remote work, you want to find prospects whose companies are based somewhere. You don't really care where the prospect is based themselves if they're the right person. All right, then we get into the role. So these ones, there's a couple of overlaps, and there's a reason for this. These role filters are a little bit messy. Sometimes when you include a certain title, it's going to show you people who have that title, but also people who have a similar title to the one that you're filtering by. This can lead to a lot of noise in your results, or it can even lead you to miss out on certain leads because people call themselves all kinds of funny stuff. When I used to be a recruiter, it was one of my biggest frustrations because a sales rep can be an account executive, a sales rep,
Sales director,
a sales associate,
sales manager,
in Australia, they call them business development managers,
account director,
territory rep,
chief executive vice president of customer relations and revenue attainment. That last one was funny.
There's all these different names for the same thing, and LinkedIn is limited in how much you can pick up the variations of one title. So by mixing around the function, seniority, and titles that it gives you, you can try and experiment and see what kind of different results you start to see. Make sure you're not missing anyone, but also exclude anything that's causing a lot of noise to appear in your results. For example, if I was to search for lawyer, I might get a bunch of paralegals who aren't qualified as my potential buyers. So we might want to start excluding those types of people or playing around with the different filters so that we make sure that we can exclude those folks from the search or get more of the lawyers that we're looking for. So first of all is the function. This is what department, what function of the company they have. Are they in the sales department, the engineering department? Then we have the current job title. So if I whack in here VP of Finance, then what we'll start to see is a collection of people who meet that criteria. VP of Finance, VP Finance, Vice President of Finances and Administration. We get about 2.5 thousand results. However, if we go to function, finance, seniority level, vice president, then we get 5,000 results. That's twice as many results for what should essentially be the same thing. But because there's so many different titles out there, LinkedIn doesn't always pick them up when you search for a specific title. So play around with these. Check out what the search looks like. See if it's just noise or if there's giving you results that you weren't finding by just using the title filter. You can also search and filter by past job titles. This one can be really helpful when you're first understanding your ICP, trying to get an understanding of what a typical career progression or seniority or org chart hierarchy looks for your specific persona. So if I put in my past job title as VP of Finance, then what I'll see is a bunch of people who have since now moved up in the world from that role. So a lot of these folks have now ended up being CEOs and CFOs. So that gives me an idea that typically after a VP of Finance role, people will either move to a Chief Financial Officer or a Chief Executive Officer, or they go ahead and start their own company. So knowing that will help me better understand my personas, but really, while it's looking for leads, it's not as useful. The next two are less relevant as well. Years in current company, so how many years have they worked for their existing employer? That can be helpful if you're looking for people who have been around for a little while, but generally at the VP level, people can start making changes pretty soon after they start their role. They're often brought in to make some of those strategic decisions. So don't rely on these and assume that someone has to be at a company for a certain amount of time before you start targeting them. I would say you definitely want to wait till they've been there for at least 60 days, because that's when they're still kind of getting their bearings, doing their orientation, onboarding. But after that, I would say they're probably in a position to start making some changes if there are problems existing in their company. And then there's the years in current position. Similar kind of theme. I don't really use this one that much. We then go into some personal filters. So the first one is geography. This can be helpful because although a company could be headquartered in New York, they could have locations all around the globe. And you might just want to speak to the person who is in the US. So they might have a vice president of operations based in Europe, but they're not the VP of operations for the whole company. They're just the VP of operations for the European division. So you're going to want to try and make sure that you're using these geographic filters to find people who speak the same language as you and are most likely be in charge of the function at their company, depending on where it's headquartered. Next up is industry. And I would say this is probably the most misleading filter in Sales Navigator, because it's self-selected by the person. When you create a LinkedIn profile or when you edit your LinkedIn profile, it asks you to select your industry. The problem is, when you let people do things by themselves, there's going to be some human error. People might list the industry that they work for. For example, if they work for a HR software company, then they might list their industry as human resources. But the reality is they don't work in human resources, they work in the IT and software industry. People can start introducing a lot of noise at this point, and you can miss out on a ton of leads if you use these industry filters too strictly. So look through them. You'll also see that these filters are kind of weirdly named. For example, if I type in software, I get software development, which isn't really an industry in my mind. So these filters can be very restrictive if we over rely on them. I'll show you a way that you can get around these filters later. Do use them, but be aware that you're probably missing out on some leads who have their industries listed as something else. Give you a real quick example. If I do, let's say, packaging and containers is the industry, then the very first result I get is a VP of sales at a company called ShipBob.
ShitBob?
ShipBob with a P.
Oh, ShipBob. My bad.
ShipBob isn't a company that sells packaging containers. They're a company that sells to the shipping industry. They are a shipping software. So realistically, their industry isn't packaging containers, they're a software company. But he's listed that as his industry because that's the industry he sells into. The same thing could happen to a marketing person or a CEO. So again, just be careful of these industries because they're very restrictive, and LinkedIn gives you some weird options when you do it, which means you get some weird self-selections. Next one is first name and last name. Now, up until recently, I didn't have a real good use case for these ones. However, recently, a connection of mine on LinkedIn did give me a kind of pretty darn good idea. He said, if you want to scale video outreach. And this could be a little bit dirty, but if you're open to this idea, you're probably going to think this is blasphemy, Tyler. If you use the first name filter, you can record a video for someone called Kate, and then go and find a bunch of people with the first name Kate and send them all the same video. Essentially scaling it without having to worry about using some dodgy AI that's going to make you say the word Kate, but all the people called Kate who fit under your ICP and your reason for making that video can now receive that same video, and you can essentially scale it at a rate that's a little bit faster than recording, let's say, 10 different videos that are almost exactly the same for 10 different people called Kate.
My name is Tyler Lassard. I wrote the book on video selling, and I approve this approach.
500 IQ move, right? That one's from Junior Latte. Give him a follow on LinkedIn. The last name filter, I still haven't found a use case for this one, but if you have one, feel free to reach out to me. Profile language. So this one is going to be helpful if you want to just speak to people who speak the same native language as you, but again, be careful, because most folks in Europe do speak pretty darn good English. So even if their profile is in French, they probably speak some degree of English, especially if they work in global software or a global industry. So be careful using this one, because again, it could limit and miss out on some results. Years of experience. This would probably be more useful if you were a recruiter. I'm yet to find a great use case for it for finding leads. And then you get groups. So LinkedIn, although this feature isn't heavily adopted, has groups that people can join and network within. The good news is, if you're in the same group as someone else, you have added visibility to their profile, even if they're not a second degree connection, but also you can directly DM them without having to use an in-mail or be directly connected with them. So when you start prospecting, I recommend looking for a few industry groups that your prospects are likely to be part of. They may be inactive, they may be from a few years ago, but if you can get into those groups, then you can open up a lot more network and start to find a lot more prospects. You can also start to search by people who are in a certain group, which will again help you nail down on a very specific persona. For example, if I jump in here, there's the Cybersecurity Forum Initiative, the CSFI. I imagine that's probably a great group for cybersecurity people to mingle and talk to one another. If you were selling into the cybersecurity persona, joining that group would allow you to see a lot more prospects and potentially message them directly without ever having to be in connect with them. And finally, what school they went to. I wouldn't use this one that often, realistically. Even if they went to the same school as you, that's not really a great reason to reach out to someone. But if you're selling to alumni or faculty members, then maybe you might use this filter. All right, moving now on to some of the more juicy filters that LinkedIn has added a lot more recently. They've started adding in intent and triggers and spotlights into their search filters, so you can look for reasons to reach out to people while you're doing your search. For example, in the buyer intent section, you can look at people who are already following your company on LinkedIn. This could mean, especially if your company posts a lot of content, that they're familiar with your offering but aren't a customer yet. Those people are going to be much more receptive to your message because they're going to recognize your company's brand and maybe know a little bit more about your offering than a normal cold lead. You can also look at people who have viewed your profile recently. This can be helpful if you're someone who has a personal brand, creates a lot of content, and you're looking for leads who are more engaged and maybe know of you already. The number of cold calls I've made where I call someone and say, "Hey, it's Will Aitken," and I call a sales leader and they go, "No way, it's Will Aitken." That's a great way to start off a cold call. It's a lot better than the usual kind of cold shoulder you get from someone when you cold call them. The other thing you can use this one for is if you're sending connection requests or messages to a lot of prospects, you can search by this filter and the people that you've connected with to see if they've looked at your profile. If you've sent them a connection request and they've looked at your profile, but they haven't accepted, that suggests that they probably ignored your request. There's actually a feature on LinkedIn that allows you to withdraw a connection request, and that means you can reconnect with them after 60 days have elapsed. Maybe give it another shot. This time you could include a connection request note so you can take a second swing at someone, because if they've ignored you on LinkedIn, then it becomes very difficult to message them without using in-mail. In-mails aren't very effective in my experience. You then have the best path in filters. So you can search for people who are a first, second, third degree connection or are in a group with you. A first degree connection is someone that you're directly connected with. A second degree connection is someone who's a connection of one of your first degree connections. And a third degree connection is someone who is not connected with anyone that you're connected with. You get limited visibility on third degree connections. So I do recommend connecting with a wide variety of people in your industry to try and open up some visibility into net new profiles who have their visibility settings set up so that you cannot see everything about them. All right, so the next filter is connections of. This allows you to see people who are connected with someone else. There's two main ways you can use this. Number one, look for easy referrals with your existing customers or your senior executives. Look for people who are connected directly with those people, and that way you can ask for warm introductions for people who already know them. Now, the second way is a little bit more cheeky. This allows you to look for people who are connected with the customer success managers and sales reps of your competitors. Devious. So what that means is you can kind of have a best guess that anyone who fits your ICP, who is connected with your customer success managers at a competitor, are probably an existing or past customer of that company. Why is that useful? Well, if you know that competitor sucks at a certain thing, maybe they don't have an open API, or maybe a lot of customers leave them for a certain reason and come to you, you can use very targeted messaging to those prospects to highlight the pain point that you know your competitor doesn't help solve. You don't have to say, hey, I know that you're working with a competitor. You can just talk about the thing that you know that they might not be getting or maybe frustrated with by using that competitor as their current vendor. You can only use this filter on people that you're directly connected with. So connect with your competitors' sales reps and their customer success managers. And as long as their privacy settings don't prevent you from seeing their connections, you can use this filter to great effect. If you'd like to prevent this from happening to you, your customer success managers, and your sales team, then go onto your LinkedIn profile, go to Settings and Privacy, go to Visibility, click on Connections, and then under there it says Connection Visibility. Allow your connections to see your connection list. Make sure that is set to off. By default, it is set to on. So be sure to change that if you want to avoid anyone doing this to you. You can also then see people who are past colleagues of you. Maybe they're people you've worked with in the past, or maybe they're just someone that you could have something in common with and have a reason for reaching out to them. If you can find someone who worked at the same company as you, maybe it was the same time and you knew them, or maybe it was a different time, or maybe you just didn't know them or ever engage with them, you can still use that as a warm intro. You could say something like this. Hey, you remember at this company, we always had that one problem? Well, I now work for a company that solves that. Does this sound interesting to you? That's another way to smoothly weave in some personalization or an observation into your messaging and use the extra common ground of the fact that you both worked for the same company at some point in time. And then we get onto the more trigger-based ones. So you can see recent updates. For example, have any of these prospects changed jobs in the last 90 days? This probably isn't a good reason to reach out to someone within the first 60 days of when they've joined a company because they're still going to be onboarding. What's more, because this is so easy to see, a lot of automated messages use this as a trigger to get the attention of the prospect, and therefore it doesn't stand out as much as other personalization points. You can also filter by people who are posting on LinkedIn. So if you want to find people whose post you could maybe integrate into your outbound messaging somehow, this is a great way to find people who are actively posting on the platform, and therefore ones that you can actually maybe engage with, comment on their posts, like their posts, or reference one of their posts in your outreach. And then finally, mentioned in the news. So this one is going to be if they've been mentioned in the LinkedIn news at all, their company or them. This can be really helpful if there are any prospects who have it, but realistically, most prospects aren't being mentioned in the news very often. The final filters that you're going to be using are the workflow filters. These are ones that are more related to how you've got your LinkedIn Sales Navigator and your CRM connected. So the first thing is persona. This is a newer feature that LinkedIn has built, which allows you to build a preset persona or personas in LinkedIn so you can avoid having to enter the job title and all that demographic information every single time you want to do a new search. Now, this is pretty much the same as all the role and company filters that I showed before, but this allows you to have them saved as a template so you can quickly apply them to a new search. Account lists. I'm going to show you that this is super helpful for making your searches a lot better in a minute when I show you the account filters. But this essentially allows you to search for a type of person who's already in one of your account lists. So if you build an account list, then you can overlap that into your lead searches and look for people who are part of the accounts in the list that you've built. I'll show you why you want to do that in a moment. Lead lists, so you can include or exclude anyone who's already in one of your lists. That's helpful if you want to make sure you're not doing any overlap or repeating any work, or if you want to search within a larger list that you might have. People in the CRM. So if you're lucky enough to have your CRM, HubSpot, or Salesforce connected to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you can include or exclude people who are in your CRM. By excluding people who are in your CRM, you can assume that you're only going to be finding net new leads. Because if they're in your CRM, then it suggests that they might be someone that someone in your sales team or marketing team has contacted before. So if you're looking for net new leads, I recommend excluding anyone who's already in your CRM. People you've interacted with, so people you've viewed the profile of before, or people you've messaged. This can be helpful to find people who you might need to follow up with, or people who you've already looked at, you can exclude so that way you don't overlap and duplicate your work. And then finally, saved leads and accounts. You can include or exclude anyone who's part of a saved lead list, any of your lead lists, or someone who's part of an account in one of your account lists. So again, great place to exclude or include leads to avoid overlap or search within your account lists. This one could be very helpful when you upload an account list from CSV or from your Salesforce connection, because that way you can search within your named accounts if you have named accounts, or if you have, let's say, a list of 1,000 accounts that you're targeting, you can upload those accounts and only search within those accounts to find the right people at those accounts. Big time saver. Much faster than going in and adding current company one at a time. Now, when you get your results, you're going to be scrolling through these. You're going to select people who look like a fit. One thing to note while you're scrolling through leads is that you can start to see mutual connections. This is a new feature as well. You can click on that, look for your mutual connections, see their recent posts on LinkedIn. Huge time saver versus having to go and look at their profile one by one. And then you're going to save them to a lead list. Once they're in a lead list, you can use a tool like LeadIQ, Apollo, ZoomInfo, whatever your lead provider is, to move them directly from LinkedIn Sales Navigator, get their contact details, and add them to one of your outbound sales sequences or your CRM so you can begin reaching out to them. Sadly, there's no way to export from LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They're trying to keep their data theirs. So you have to use one of these third-party tools to find a way to actually start emailing or calling these people. Within LinkedIn, you can send messages and emails to people, messages to people you're first-degree connections with, and emails to people who you're not. However, I've found the best way to do it is take them out, put them in a sequence, and target them later. As we scroll through this list, we're going to start to see that there are people who aren't maybe a fit for our search. So right now I've got a vice president of sales search going. However, as I scroll down, I'm noticing that there are some noisy results in here. There's people who are the vice president of sales enablement. There's people who are the vice president of sales operations. If I'm only trying to target the VP of sales, then this isn't helpful for me because I'm scrolling through all these non-fit leads. A lot less efficient going through this. Rather than being able to select them all, I have to make sure I'm not including any noisy results because I don't want to be targeting these people as if they're VP of sales if they're not my ideal buyer persona. So in those cases, that's where you might start making use of a keyword search. This is one of the most underutilized features that I've seen in Sales Navigator. That's mainly because LinkedIn doesn't do a good job of telling you that you can use this. What you can do is search for keywords that are present on a prospect's profile. That's in their job description, their headline, their about section. What this often means is you can search more specifically than the filters that LinkedIn's given you. Because generally, let's say if anyone works in the software or SaaS industry, somewhere on their profile, it's likely they're going to write the word software. But their industry might have been listed as we mentioned before, human resources, IT and consulting, software development. So this is essentially a better way to search for someone's industry or search for a specific type of lead. You can even use this to find people who maybe are a podcast host. You can search the word podcast and that will give you people who have the word podcast on their profile, which means you can then go ahead and find people who have a podcast, maybe listen to that podcast. These keywords, the opportunities are endless and it's definitely worth experimenting with them. It's made all that more powerful by the fact that you can actually start to combine multiple keywords, queries, and phrases using what's called a Boolean search. A Boolean search is a string. It's used by database developers and recruiters to search for certain queries and words within a large data set. I learned this skill when I was a recruiter and I was looking for a lot of resumes. I would use a Boolean search to look through the resumes and find the right keywords that would make a candidate a good fit for the role that I was recruiting for. You can use that exact same principle to search through your leads and start including or excluding people who maybe are better fits or worse fits for your company. So if I use a keyword search here, I could write software. I'm now only seeing people who have the word software somewhere in their profile, in their company, in their headline, in their about section, in their job descriptions, in their skills. If I put industry, software, and I include that instead, then it only gives me 145 results. So now you're seeing that I could have missed out on around 400 leads who potentially were a good fit because the industry filter was too strict. So if I do a keyword search for software and removing the industry filter, I'm going to get a lot more results and find those leads that other people might not be finding. Those leads who are not being targeted as often because their profile isn't showing up in the standard search results that people are going to be doing. Now, these search queries can get longer. You can start to exclude words or search for multiple words. There's three main functions of doing this. The first one is or. By using the words OR, or in caps, what you're going to do is search for multiple words. So that way, if one of those words exists somewhere on the profile, that will make them appear in the results. This could be useful when people call the same thing several different things. So someone might call sales sales, but they might also call it business development. By searching for both of those, you make sure that you're not missing anyone who might be calling it a different thing. For example, software and SaaS are the same thing, or SaaS and software as a service. They're the same thing, but they're being said in different ways. If we were just searching for SaaS, then we might miss some people who wrote out software as a service. So by using the OR function, we can search for two queries at the same time. The second function is AND. So unlike OR, this will look for two words that are both existing on someone's profile. This will help you search for, let's say, software and sales. That way you can only see profiles that have both the word software and the word sales somewhere in their profile, or legal and owner. That way you're probably finding lawyers who are owners of their own company. You can find and experiment with these strings a lot. But as we get a bit longer, we can also start to exclude keywords. If I was searching for vice president of sales, I may not want to see anyone who is a regional vice president of sales or a vice president of sales enablement. At that point, I can start using the not function. By using not, all caps, I can exclude any words or queries following that function. Instead of doing one word at a time, I can also start to put them together as phrases. By using quotation marks, I can contain a phrase, so I can look for something that's written exactly as it is. For example, software as a service, all as one quote, will look for the entire phrase of software as a service rather than software as a service as separate words. If you remember high school maths, and you probably remember that brackets contain a certain formula, you can do the same thing with this. So I'm going to do a quick example here. I could do open bracket, software, or SaaS, close bracket. So that query is just going to show me now people who have the word software or the word SaaS somewhere on their profile. But I want to look for more than that. I could also do and, quotation, VP of sales, close quotation, or vice president of sales, close quotation, or VP sales. Right there, we have the same title written three different ways. VP of sales, vice president of sales, VP sales. They all mean the exact same thing, right? That way, we're now looking for anyone who has one of those three titles on their profile. We might want to try and exclude some results. So we'll use the not function and exclude the words regional or enablement or operations. And then hit search. And just like that, we now have 51 results. But these are 51 results that we can be very confident are all very good fits for our search because we've done such an in-depth string there. So instead of scrolling through all these profiles, I can just select all and then whack them straight into a lead list without having to scroll through and check each one's a fit. Again, massive time saver, and it's going to allow you to find leads that no one else is seeing, but also exclude leads who aren't a fit, so you can save time scrolling through all these people who might not be a fit.
Okay, Will, this is amazing information, but dude, you need to recharge. And we're back.
You might have noticed that there's two types of searches on Sales Navigator. There's leads and account searches. So let's go ahead and look at the account searches, how you can search for specific accounts that's looking for certain companies, and then how you can actually use those account lists once you've built a list of good fit accounts. Now, one of the best things about the account search is that it has some filters that the lead search doesn't have in it. These are filters that less people are using, and therefore you can use them to start weaving in observations, personalization points, and triggers into your search, reducing the amount of work, time, and personalization you have to do when you start targeting these people. It allows you to build a lead list of prospects who are all facing the same symptom or trigger, and therefore you can use similar messaging to target every single prospect in that lead list. So by using these account filters, you're going to start to be able to weave in those observations and triggers much more easy into your lead lists. So let's run through them. First of all, company attributes. First one is annual revenue. So this is helpful. You might know that companies that do over 50 million in revenue just aren't a very good fit for your solution. Or companies that have under $1 million in revenue probably won't be able to afford your product. So you can start to include or exclude certain revenue bands. The next is company headcount. Again, a really common one. You might know that companies that need over 50 employees to start suffering from the problems that you can help them solve. On the other end of the spectrum, you might know that once a company gets to 1,000 employees, they start needing an enterprise solution that might be more complex or more custom than the product that you offer. This is one that wasn't available in the lead search. Company headcount growth. This allows you to look for companies that are either growing or shrinking their headcount, because you can use minus numbers in this as well. That's really useful because not many people know that you can target companies based on them losing headcount, not just gaining headcount. Companies that are gaining headcount are obviously going to be experiencing growing pains. They might be doing well and therefore more likely looking to invest in new solutions to improve the way they do business. Meanwhile, companies that are shrinking their headcount are likely suffering from the results of an earlier problem that they might be still looking to solve. If they've had to do layoffs, then maybe their forecasts weren't accurate. Maybe they have high employee turnover because their employees aren't engaged. And if you sell an employee engagement software, well then lowering headcount is a great reason to reach out to a company, because that's a problem that you can directly help people with. There's probably different examples based on what you sell, but if you use a bit of thought in there and figure out what problems could have resulted in layoffs or what problems layoffs could create, then you can start to figure out good reasons for reaching out to companies. Headquarters location, useful again because you can now look within your territory. Industry, this one's a little bit more specific than the one that people are allowed to choose in their profile. But again, do be careful because generally this will be chosen by the social media manager or the page manager at the company you're targeting. So don't overly rely on this, but do know it's probably going to be a little bit more accurate. If we go on to, let's say, Lavender's page, then we can see that their industry is listed as writing and editing. Even though they're a software product, their industry is listed as the problem, the industry, the function of their product versus the industry that they're actually in, which is the software development industry. Number of followers. This one could be helpful, especially if you sell a solution that's going to help people create content or help them with their social media. And then this is where we get really specific. I love these filters here. Department headcount. So if you sell a solution, let's say you sell to marketing teams, but you only sell to marketing teams that have at least 5 employees on the team, well then you can set a minimum size of a certain department within the accounts that you're going to get as a result. I used to sell a software that had a minimum of 10 users on a sales team. So I could use this department headcount filter to search for sales teams that had at least 10 sellers on the team. That meant that I wasn't going to waste my time reaching out to companies that weren't big enough for me to actually sell to. This next one, department headcount growth, or we can also do the opposite, decline, by using negative numbers. That means we can look for companies whose finance team is growing at a huge rate. Or maybe we're looking for teams whose marketing team has shrunk recently. That can imply layoffs, turnover, or can imply they're going to be facing some problems from growing their team at a fast pace. By using certain percentage in this, we can make sure we account for some error. If there's only 5 people on the team and 1 person leaves, that's a 20% decrease. Or if someone joins, that's a 20% increase. A great way to weave some triggers into your search. You can start reaching out to people saying, hey, couldn't help but notice that your marketing team's been growing lately. And that's quite relevant messaging that can imply a lot of different challenges and problems later on in your message or your cold call. Fortune, so are they part of the Fortune 100, Fortune 500? This is really helpful if you're selling to enterprise accounts or named accounts. And here's another one that wasn't available in the lead search. Technologies used. I wouldn't rely on this too much because I have found it could be hit or miss in terms of its accuracy, but this allows you to look for companies that are using a certain technology. So if you're a HubSpot partner, you can look for companies that are using HubSpot today, which is really useful. That said, it does sometimes give you some false positives, telling you that some people do use the HubSpot when they don't. And it does often miss out people who are using HubSpot, but it doesn't find them. If you're selling a specific solution that requires someone to use another product, this can be really helpful to find some good fit leads very quickly. Next up are some spotlights. So these are triggers that you can actually use in your messaging. Do they have any job opportunities open right now? Are they hiring on LinkedIn? You can also see recent activities. Senior leadership changes, often when there's leadership changes, for example, if someone hired a new COO, then a few months later, the VP of sales and VP of marketing might get let go. I'm just checking if you're listening. Also, you can look for companies who have had funding events in the past 12 months. Whilst you might not want to use funding as a trigger to reach out to someone and say, hey, I saw you raised some money, do you want to give me some? You can often use funding as a reason to look into further problems. You can know that if someone generates funding, then oftentimes they start growing out their sales team, or they want to start developing new features or moving into new markets. And if you have a solution that helps one of those, then you can use the knock-on effect of what funding can mean for that company to highlight a challenge or problem that you can help solve with. Don't lead with, hey, I saw you had some funding, our product does this, this, and this. Instead, think about the problems and knock-on effects that a funding event can have. What do people do when they raise funding? They grow their sales team, they develop their product, they look to expand into new geographies and markets. They might be looking to make some quick acquisitions to improve the functionality of their product. If you have a solution that can help them with that, then you have a reason for reaching out. Here's a pro tip as well to use that funding trigger. If you can see that someone's generated funding, often funding events almost always come with a press release. In that press release, there's often a statement from the investor and also the CEO of that company, and they will often tell you what their plans are to allocate that funding, what their plans are to do with that funding, and what their next moves will be. If you have a solution that aligns with what they say they want plan to do, well, then you've got a really personalized point of how you can introduce your product or service to that prospect. Hey, your CEO said that the funding will be mainly put towards developing new functionalities that are geared towards the staffing and recruiting industry. And let's say if you're a staffing and recruiting publication and you're selling advertising, well, then that's a fabulous reason to reach out to them because you know they're going to be targeting that industry soon. Connection, so you can see companies that you might already have a first degree connection at. Easy intros, easy people you can message immediately because you're connected with them. And then we get onto those workflow filters. Again, you can look for companies that are or are not in your CRM already, or you can look for companies that are in a specific account list. So what do you do once you've found an account search? Well, you're going to go through the list of accounts that you've got there. And you're going to select the ones that look like a fit and you're going to add them to an account list. Once they're in an account list, you can go back across your lead searches and use that account list as one of the filters for the lead search. So if I whack my account list in here, I can look for companies who have had a headcount reduction on their HR department in the past 6 months. I can then look for leads at those accounts who match my persona and then use that trigger of their HR department growing or shrinking over the past 6 months or their new funding or whatever it is as a way to reach out to them. Essentially personalizing or making sure that my message is relevant to a larger group of leads. I can save all the leads at those accounts who match my personas to a lead list, go into my lead list and export that lead list using Apollo, LeadIQ, Seamless, ZoomInfo, whoever your contact detail provider is, and import them into a sequence that targets them specifically with messaging geared towards companies who have had a HR department headcount reduction. I'm essentially scaling a relevant message to several people without losing too much of the quality. So now that you've got your lead list and account list, what can you do with them? If you jump into your leads tab on the LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you're going to be able to see all of your lead lists that you've created. There's also some that LinkedIn generates for you. Recently accepted connections and InMails. These are anyone who you've connected with through the LinkedIn Sales Navigator platform or InMailed through Sales Navigator who accepted your connection request or accepted your InMail. This gives you a load of people who you can actually follow up with now that you're connected with them. The second one is recommended leads. So LinkedIn Sales Navigator isn't that smart yet, but it can recommend people based on your key personas who you've searched for in the past who might also be a fit for your product, solution, or service. There's also new executives at saved accounts. So let's say if there's a new CFO at an account, that could imply that that account is going to start making some changes, big ones generally when a new CFO comes on board relatively soon. They might be looking to increase or decrease spend, and if you have a solution that can help with that, then it might be worth targeting the specific persona that you sell to at that account with some messaging based on the fact they have a new CFO. You're also going to get all of your lead lists here. I recommend having a fair few, different lead lists for different triggers. You can click into those and then use one of those tools I mentioned beforehand to pull the contact details of those leads into your CRM or your sales engagement platform so you can begin targeting them with outbound messaging. Once you're also in a lead list, you can actually see some further triggers that can happen for those leads. For example, it will tell you if any of those leads have changed jobs in the past 90 days or if they've posted on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. One really nice hack that I found with these lead lists is that you can start to create your own Rolodex as a seller. Anyone that you sell to, anyone that you meet with, anyone you have a conversation with, anyone who you close a deal with, you can add to a lead list in Sales Navigator. And then every now and again, you can jump into that lead list and check to see if any of those people have changed jobs in the past 90 days. Because you had a conversation with them prior, you can congratulate them on their new job, but also find out if they have anything similar in place at their new company. As they're familiar with you, they're likely to give you an idea of if that pain point or challenge that you help solve is occurring at their new company, of course, once they're fully onboarded. Now, in your accounts list, LinkedIn has recently done a bit of a cheeky revamp here, and I love to see it because them adding new features to help sellers sell good is always going to be helpful. What you can do is look for companies under one of your account lists. So, for example, I have one here where they've had some headcount reduction recently, and then it's going to tell you connection paths. It's going to tell you how many people you're connected with at that account and their total headcount. So you can get an idea, let's say here, the more juicy thing they've added lately is account alerts. So this is when a trigger essentially happens at an account. It might give you an extra reason to begin reaching out to people at their account. We can see here that Flexport has recently seen a lot of Amazon Web Services employees moving to their company at an increased rate. If we click on that, we can actually see further insights about that trigger or that company. It gives us a ton of juicy information that we can then use if we want to start targeting anyone at that account. Another one here, Insight Partners has recently dramatically reduced headcount. Again, a good reason, not for them, but for you to potentially reach out and see if there's any problems that you can help with that may have contributed to those layoffs. Now, if you want to have a closer look at any of the companies, you can actually click on those and get a different type of view of that company to what you would typically see on the core LinkedIn. Sales Navigator provides you with some insights about that account. It gives you a relationship explorer, telling you the people who are most likely a fit based on your persona and previous leads that you've saved. It allows you to search within that account and start to see who you might be connected with, but also who the key stakeholders that you might want to reach out to are. You can also begin building a relationship map. This is very useful if you're doing key account targeting or trying to build awareness within an account. Maybe if you're getting replies from certain people of the account, but other people aren't responding to you, you can start to map out what that account looks like, who the head honcho is, who the decision makers might be, who the influencers might be. This is especially useful if you're an account executive and you're working a sales cycle and you want to get an idea of people who you should be multi-threading into your deal should be. For example, on Greenhouse, I can see that I am connected with Christina Finseth and Sophia Burgess, who is an enterprise sales development rep. Christina is a lead on the marketing and growth team, so I can assume she sits above Sophia in the organization chart. Therefore, I can start adding that together and account mapping where I have connections in, who I might be able to get information from, and also start to take notes on each of these individual people as well. We also get some further insights, growth insights, the number of employees they have, the distribution of those employees, what departments those employees sit within. If we can start to see that the sales department is seeing a 22% decrease headcount over the past year, again, a good reason to reach out to them if you sell something that can help people forecast better or make more sales or increase the productivity or raise the morale of their sales team. You can also start to see new hires, where those departments are getting hired if they're in senior management, and a trend of how many new hires they're making per month. We can also see their job openings. This is really helpful if you sell a recruitment solution or recruitment services. You'll see which departments actually have openings in them and how many openings they've had across the past year. If you specifically recruit in a certain area or maybe help with advertising roles to a certain demographic and you see that they're hiring a lot of engineers, well, that's a good reason to start reaching out. You scroll down a little bit further as well, you can start to find an idea of lookalike accounts. So for Greenhouse software, we can see some potential competitors of them. Lever and Lattice are both also HR tech companies that help with recruitment. So by scrolling through these, we can start to find either competitors or similar companies to Greenhouse. If Greenhouse is already a customer of ours, this is a great place to look through companies that are similar in nature. That way I can reach out to them and say, hey, we work with Greenhouse to help them solve these challenges. I know you're in a similar space to them. Would you care to see how other companies are solving those challenges using our solution? That'd be really relevant if you're reaching out to a direct competitor of a customer who you're already working with. That's a really relevant message and it's sure to get the attention of the person you're reaching out to. And then finally at the bottom there, you're going to see some account alerts. Those are big changes that are happening at the accounts, new executives, layoffs, big headcount changes, those types of things. If we want to get a closer look at a specific lead, we can click onto their profile and we can get an idea immediately of what they've been posting recently. So we can personalize information based on what they're posting. If we actually click into their profile, we'll be able to see people who we're already connected with, shared connections, people who could potentially introduce us to them, or folks who have had shared work experience. If they currently work with one of my ex-colleagues, I can reach out to my ex-colleague and say, hey, miss you, hope you're great. By the way, I'm trying to reach out to this person. What's the best way to get their attention? They could make a direct introduction or allow me to name drop them in a message to this prospect. Once you've started saving leads and accounts, that's where the homepage in Sales Navigator it will start to become more populated with new information. This is where it's going to show you alerts from your leads and accounts. You can filter to see which leads and accounts you see alerts from, but it's going to tell you when a lead that you've saved posts on LinkedIn or an account that you've saved has posted a new job or had some department changes. This is helpful if, again, you're targeting some key accounts or you're looking for new reasons to start reaching out to companies. So you've built a couple of lead lists, you've exported them to your sequences. What else is in Sales Navigator that we might not be thinking about? Well, if you're using the advanced plan, you can start making use of smart links. You can connect it to your CRM. You can even upload CSV lists of accounts. Because I'm a cheapskate and I don't really have a use for a lot of those features because I don't use the CRM because I'm lazy, I can't show you those. But what I can show you is a Sales Navigator inbox. Sales Navigator keeps your inbox separate from the one that you use in Sales Navigator. There's a couple of reasons for this. A lot of employers want to sync the messages that are sent through Sales Navigator with their CRM. But what wouldn't be fair is for them to have access to all of your LinkedIn messages, as the core LinkedIn platform is used for recruiting and networking. It would be an invasion of privacy if they could see all of your messages on that platform. So instead, when you get Sales Navigator for yourself or with an employer, it will create a separate inbox in Sales Navigator, which is going to have a separate set of messages. If you have your CRM connected, they'll sync with your CRM. Your employer would be able to see these messages as well. It's also important to note that when you get a response to a message that you've sent using Sales Navigator, you will not see the response to that message on core LinkedIn. So it's worth checking this inbox separately to make sure that you're not missing any messages. Most Sales Navigator platforms also come with some in-mail credits. However, I don't recommend using in-mails that often. I just haven't seen success. Even with hyper-personalized in-mails, it hasn't been a good use of my time. I highly recommend trying to find a way to get people to connect with you as a first-degree connection, and then sliding into their DMs with a normal message, which is much more likely to get seen and less likely to be ignored. Thank you and good night. Get out there, navigate some sales, use this platform. It is probably the #1 most valuable platform I use as a seller. Boom. Pow. Skirt. Shit, Bob. Shit, Bob. I say shit. You say Bob. Shit, Bob.